Probably a month and a half after I took over as interim CEO, or as it announced that I was going to take the interim CEO role, a board member called me one night and was like, I know this says interim, but the best thing you could do for the business is to act like the CEO. And I think that's the best piece of advice I was given.
Rachel Romer built a $4.4 billion company that made college possible for Walmart cashiers and Disney janitors without debt. In 2015, she co-founded Guild Education out of a tiny Denver office with her Stanford classmate Brittany Stitch. Their pitch: transform tuition assistance into real career mobility. Make it seamless, debt-free, make it work for the workers left behind. Guild quickly became the hottest edtech startup in America, backed by top VCs, partnering with giants like Walmart, Disney, Chipotle, Hilton. By 34, Rachel had built a new category: education as a work benefit. And then she had a stroke, 3 brain surgeries, total paralysis on her right side. She couldn't speak, but she had planned for every eventuality for her business. Her message was clear: call Bijal Shah. Bijal, then Chief Experience Officer, was on maternity leave, recovering from a traumatic birth. But when the call came, she stepped into the lead. Today's episode isn't just about Rachel's vision. It's about the woman she trusted most to carry it forward. From slum development in India to building workforce mobility for millions, Bijal Shah is now Chief Executive Officer, guiding Guild through its most critical chapter yet. Scaling for the AI era, delivering outcomes, and proving that servant leadership is a strategy, not a sentiment. This is a story of legacy, resilience, and rising, exactly when it matters most. I was honored to tell this story because for all the headlines and hype, the real work of building is often messy, human, and unseen. And those are the real billion-dollar moves.
When I was 25 years old, I worked at Visa, amazing company. I loved working there. Very complicated business with a lot of people not understanding kind of the foundations of what that business does. But while I was working there, my cousin, who actually lived with us when I was in high school, he suddenly passed away. And I think my way of coping with that situation, and everyone deals with that type of tragedy pretty differently, but my way of coping was, I need to be doing something different. I don't know when my own life is going to end. It could end any day. And I want to make sure I do something really impactful in the world. And so I actually ended up moving to India, pursuing a fellowship with the American India Foundation. It was a joint fellowship with the Clinton Foundation. I actually went to work on slum development issues. And one of the primary things I worked on was something called market-aligned skills training. So helping individuals in India who come from underserved communities actually get the skills they need to be able to pursue jobs that pay good economic wages, but inside of India. And so one thing you realize is this problem isn't just persistent to the United States, it's actually persistent around the world, and that everyone is trying to figure out, how do you get working adult learners or learners who are entering the workforce skilled in a way that they can participate pretty productively in the environment. I actually ended up going back to Visa after working in slum development and market aligned skills training. And then here we are some 20 years later. Actually, I'm working in kind of the same sector, but inside the United States. And if you had told me that's what was going to happen, I would have said, no, I'm not sure that's what I'll be doing. But here we are.
Yeah, so from Pune, India, working in slum development to now in the United States, what was the first meeting point with Rachel? I understand you joined a little bit later when it was Rachel and Britt. Tell us a little bit about, that meet cute, the genesis of really the making of Bijal, the CEO.
Yeah, so I actually knew Rachel socially. I knew that she is working on a company called Guild. I didn't know much about it. I, at the time, was working at another high growth startup in Denver called Ibotta, and very focused on the ad tech and payment space. I had met her a few times, but I actually got a call from one of her board members, randomly, a board member named Michael Deering, who I also knew pretty well. He had been a mentor for me on another startup I had been working on earlier in my career. And he called me and said, I have the perfect job opportunity for you. There is a company that's focused on creating a social enterprise, so a business that is both trying to do good while building a sustainable and profitable business. They are focused on the education and workforce sector. And I think that your technology background and your background in payments actually will be quite valuable to the business. So I said, that sounds intriguing. I was super happy where I was working and really was loving building. Again, my hands were really dirty and deep inside this other business, helping to scale it. And so I wasn't really looking for a new opportunity, but I met Rachel. I heard about what she was trying to do and the problems she was trying to solve. And I really felt as though my background in ad tech plus payments, as well as my experience in India working on market aligned skills training, would be a great complement to kind of her experience and her background. I didn't really care about the role or the title. I more wanted to work on hard problems and help build things. That's one of my favorite things to do, and kind of see around the corners and see the possibilities. And so ended up joining her.
This bears a little bit of attention here. When you're making a decision like that to join a founding team, someone as experienced as you are, which a lot of our audience and listeners are, they have a lot of options actually with regard to, where do I take my path? Yeah, I've built some critical core skill sets. I know I can build 1 to 10. How did you make a bet on Rachel? What was it about her sell that made you think this felt right for me?
I think there are a few things. One is meeting both Rachel and Britt. I think they both understood the problem really well. And I think that is core when you're talking to a founder. Do they understand the problem space that they are playing in really well and what it is that a customer or end user might need? They were deeply kind of customer and human centric. They thought about things, in this case, from the eyes of frontline workers or workers who came from disadvantaged populations. They had both spent time working with this population themselves independently as coaches. They had a bold vision for how they thought this problem could be solved, which is also something that I think is really important. So understanding the problem and then having the ability to know or have a vision for that problem. And then the third for me is just looking around at the team that they had assembled. Britt and Rachel had assembled a really smart group of folks. And so I think when you look at the problem to solve, conviction around the future of what this business could look like, and then some amazing set talent around the table. It's a lot of really great ingredients to work with. And you are coming in with experience that you think could be relevant and helpful to the business. And so I think those were the three things I would say anyone should be looking for and are really important, especially when you're going to join an early stage startup or a founding team that is trying to figure out how they're going to get from where they are to where they're trying to go.
I think this is what, sort of 7 years ago when you were first joining in. Has the vision changed? Has the execution changed along the way in line with also market changes? Talk to us a little bit about Guild as a business itself.
So one thing I will say before I talk about what's changed in the business is the mission has not changed. If you look at the early pitch decks that Rachel and Britt put together on what problem they were trying to solve, that problem has not changed. The notion of unlocking opportunity for America's workforce, that mission has not changed. The how has changed over time. And I think it would be naive for any leader or any founder who's starting a business to believe that your how might not change over time. And so to give you a really tangible example, when I got to Guild, they were producing content. They were creating leadership classes and financial literacy classes from scratch to try and meet the needs of employers like Chipotle and Walmart. We do have one part of our business today that creates content on Academy business that is very focused on kind of leadership and softer and more durable skills, but that is not the core of what Guild does. The core of what Guild does is we run a marketplace and we bring to bear the best learning providers in the country and help ensure that we are holding them accountable to outcomes and that we are putting in front of our employer partners and ultimately their employees really great learning options that will actually drive mobility outcomes for them. And so we went from a business that was trying to create content itself into a business that realized in order to serve multiple types of employers and multiple verticals, we actually needed a marketplace. And so that is where, my background at Visa is so valuable. At the foundation, we have a data platform and a payments platform, and that is powering our ability to have a marketplace. And we are passing data and information as well as processing payments and then creating a user experience that allows for an employee to find the best learning option for them, given where they're trying to go or where the business believes they have critical talent needs. And so I think the mission has not changed, but the how of how the business works and fundamentally what we do has evolved quite greatly, I think, relative to the original vision.
So, in essence, a version of a Coursera on steroids for the workforce through a marketplace, right? And in some way, just because we've had Jeff Majankalda from Coursera. But this model of content creator, right, providing the content itself to become a marketplace is a very different play. Can you walk us through a little bit about that decision? Was it a push by the customer, or was it a push on, trying to hit those ARR numbers? What was it that really steered you in this direction?
I will just say we were never focused on what the ARR number. We felt as though ensuring we were being customer centric and actually delivering what the customer needed. And in this case, we are a marketplace business. So both what the employer needs, but also what their employee needs is super critical to what we do. And so making sure we're delivering on the things that they need are really critical to our business model and always have been. Customer centricity is at the core of what we do. And so these decisions aren't made based on how are we going to make a little bit more money or how can we change the way we make money, but we're very much focused on, we have customers coming to us. They are asking for, can you help our employees get the foundational skills, completing their high school diplomas, getting the ability to learn English. Those are foundational skills that need to happen regardless of where you are and where you work. And so they're coming to us with specific requests for what they need out of their employee population. And in order to service those needs in a really agile, flexible, and quick way, there's no way Guild can go build all of that content itself. And there are great providers out there who do amazing and innovative things. And so we realized very quickly that in order to meet the needs of our employers as quickly as possible, it wasn't about Guild building that content. It was about Guild going and finding the best providers and actually bringing them onto our platform. And so it was driven by a customer need and a user need at the end of the day versus the business trying to hit some financial metric or financial goal. And I think that's really important because that drives the durability of the decisions you're making. If you're just looking for that next way you're going to make a few extra bucks or how you're going to help fill a gap in revenue, you end up making short-term decisions that I think lead to maybe closing the gap you have in one quarter, but they're not durable decisions that actually drive the longevity of your business.
I love that angle. And I think it's important to also frame where we are in America because we do have a global audience. Talk a little bit about the problem that you're solving here, and has it improved in the last, 7 years that you've been in the business, or has it widened with the digital divide with now AI overpowering all the conversations?
Yeah, I will say the problem we're solving is not unique to the United States. We just happen to start in the US, and we do have a global solution now that we provide in the world because this problem is a global problem. And the problem really is that as things like AI advance the workforce, but also the needs, the half-life of skills has gone from 5 years to roughly 2.5 years. And we think it's going to end up being something where the skills you need to do the job you need to do are going to change every year. And so in order to help support the economy, we need people who are employable and have the skills to be able to meet the needs of the workforce. And that is true regardless of whatever country you're working in. In the United States in particular, these problems are pervasive across multiple different industries: manufacturing, healthcare, retail, financial services. And so our goal is to help make sure that we are bringing the foundational skills to employees across our employer partners and then getting them the specific skills they need. So, we have a learner, her name's Juanita. She was doing healthcare administration at a health system. She actually wanted to become a nurse for a very long time, but neither had the means, the money, or the time to invest from going from being an administrator to actually becoming a nurse. And so we've helped her move from this job that was more of an administrative job into a job where she's taking care of patients by helping her go get first her associate's degree in nursing and now helping her pursue getting her bachelor's degree in nursing. And so we're really helping move people from roles that they are in today to roles that are super critical inside of our employer partners and are critical to fueling our economy and having a thriving middle class, which is core to having a democracy, regardless of what country you're in.
Yeah, so a couple of points I want to dive into there. One is, of course, the state of America today. I mean, it sounds like there's a mismatch, a big mismatch of skill sets that you're looking to solve. There is growing unemployability as well, it feels like, where there's been massive layoffs, especially in the tech ecosystem. What are you seeing? You know, it's 2025. There's also threats with the tariffs, right? Every day something changes, which pushes actually opportunities for Americans to step up to the game to manufacture, but we actually don't have these skill sets. What are you seeing on the ground here? What's concerning? What's alarming?
There are three kind of different things all coming at play at the same time. The first is we have an aging population inside this country, which means the workforce actually shrinking. The number of working adults inside the United States as the boomer population exits the workforce is continuing to shrink. That's the first thing going on. The second thing is AI is disrupting work. You see it particular in the technology sector. We're starting to see it in financial services. And so you are seeing these disruptions happening to people's work because the skills that are required for companies are changing relatively quickly and what they need out of their workforce is changing. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is you have this push inside of the United States in particular to bring things like advanced manufacturing back to the US. And as you said, there is a shortage of people who know how to work inside of advanced manufacturing facilities, who know how to actually work with the technology inside of those facilities, who know how to lead teams who are working on the production floor. And so you see CHROs in particular and their HR, the leadership inside of those organizations, as well as operators inside of those businesses, looking out at not just the next 6 months, but the next 3 years and the next 5 years, being like, how are we going to fill this talent gap and this void we have inside this country, especially knowing that in the US, the education system isn't totally aligned to what the workforce needs are. And there are challenges with the operating model for our education system. And so you have a lot of people who really believe that there's a problem to solve. And I think sometimes people stop and are look for the perfect solution when there are a lot of things that are out there today where you can get the ball rolling. We've been around for 10 years. We've helped 70,000 employees drive mobility in their roles and to move from roles they're in to more critical roles that employers needs. And do we get everything right and perfect? We don't. We do mess up, but we've moved 70,000 people. I'm not sure anyone else can say that they do that at that scale, including other providers in our space. The beauty of our marketplace model and the fact that we hook into academic institutions as well as hook into employers is that we can track what is happening with these employees, both inside their existing employer, but also over time. And so we're super proud of those results, and we got a lot of work to do, Sarah.
So 70,000, that's a huge amount in a short amount of time. Walk us through a little bit about the business model here. I think marketplace, it sounds like it's a subscription plug-on, but of course, very different employers from Walmart to Chipotle require very different things. What does this look like from a business perspective?
Very early on in our process, we sit down with employers and ask them what business outcomes they're trying to drive. Are they trying to fill hard to fill roles? Are they trying to drive retention inside their organizations? Are they trying to attract talent that they have not been able to attract in the past? Are they trying to ensure that they can upskill folks inside the business who have been there for a while to keep up with the pace of change or to move into leadership roles? And so we have to get really clear on the problem that the employer is trying to solve first. And that happens during the sales process. What problem are you trying to solve? And what is your biggest HR and talent issue? Because that then helps us decide what is most important and what do we bring to bear inside of our platform. And so every employer has a very different catalog and a very different policy around what they're trying to do with their employee population. It's bespoke to the employer. So once we understand the problem the employer is trying to solve, we try and understand the employee population better. What's unique about this employee population? How many people have finished high school? How many many people have bachelor's degrees? How many people speak English as a second language inside of their employer or don't know English at all? In understanding the employee population, just like in healthcare, you want to understand the patient population is super important so we can put the right solution together to help bring to bear what is needed. And so we work with a large grocery chain in the Southeast, one of the most innovative, I believe, in the country. And they have a lot of employees who don't speak English, and they have a lot of employees who haven't finished their high school diploma. That's great because that gives us a starting base to say what is most important to get these individuals the foundational skills they need before we start layering on bachelor's degrees or advanced certificates or all of those other things that I think people really want or that Coursera might provide. There's like a foundation that has to happen before people can take advantage of those types of opportunities. And so we really are trying to understand the employee population. Once we understand that, we can then spend time saying, great, what should go inside of your platform and your catalog that you're offering to your users? What types of degree programs, because you have hard to fill roles? What types of trades programs? What types of foundational skills should go into the catalog? What types of certificate programs should go into the catalog? And we really are intentional about what we put inside the catalog. And this is learning that's happened over time. In our early days, we would just stick everything in because we would say we don't know enough about the employee population or we don't know enough about what the employer's needs are. And so let's turn on a bunch of things. But as we've worked with many more employers and learned more and more about their employee populations, we've been able to actually optimize what that experience looks like and what goes into their experience.
Early days, hard to imagine that a big company like Walmart would agree to a tech startup. And obviously you've built your credibility now, but has the sales cycle shrunk for you? What did that look like in the early days?
We got really lucky with Walmart. There were a set of leaders inside of Walmart at that time who were willing to take a bet on a company like Guild. With them and Chipotle and players like Disney, like we owe them a lot of credit for willing to take that chance and that bet and come on this journey with us. We didn't have everything figured out or sorted out, and there was risk in them wanting to help enable and support an organization like ours. So our sales cycle is less taking a bet and a risk on a startup these days, just because we're a proven quantity now. We have outcomes data to prove what we're doing, but the sales cycle still takes 6 to 9 months. And a lot of that is because we are trying to make sure we deliver the right solution for the employer partner. And so rushing that process is not good for us in the long run. We don't care about winning the deal. We care about creating a durable, sustainable partnership with our employers and making sure their employees get what they need. And so we need to spend that cycle actually understanding their problems and curating the right solution. And then for us in particular, we do focus on making sure that we work through the process of getting the employer stood up on our platform. Our goal is to drive outcomes. We want to make sure people actually complete their programs and that they finish their programs, that they actually see career mobility or growth, or even in some cases, you ask people why they sign up for these programs. They are trying to build confidence in themselves or show their kids that they can do something. And so there are a lot of different reasons why employees sign up for what they're embarking on. And so just making sure we're helping deliver a successful outcome to that employee, because that means the employer will then be successful, is super important.
So is it sort of like a package deal where Walmart signs up for X amount of employees and these are the list of items that are provided, and it's a transaction-based sort of percentage for the courses that's sold by the merchant in some way?
We're a consumption-based business, so we don't make money unless the employee actually persists in their program and that they continue in their program. And so we have more of like a snowflake model than a traditional SaaS model. And more, I think tech companies are seeing the value of consumption-driven businesses, because especially in, enterprise sales and in enterprise businesses, they are asking questions around who's using this? What are they doing with it? What outcome is being driven? And so no, there's no fixed fee or cost to the employer in terms of fixed number of seats. We get employees to engage on our platform. And then when they engage and they continue to persist in their programs, we are successful as a business.
So you're incentivized for sure by the right metrics here, which is to ensure that the employees want to do it. And one of the things that actually struck a chord with me was when you picked out from your data that certain decisions, like what Walmart did with $1 a day, was counterintuitive. Tell us a little bit about, some of the interesting, I guess, consumer behaviors that you picked up since you're deep in product when you started?
And again, it depends a little bit on what the employer is trying to drive. But one of the things that some of our employers had before even they joined on Guild was, have the employee have skin in the game. Or I'm going to offer this, but I'm going to do it in a way where they have to pay first and I'll reimburse the employee later. And what you realize, especially when you think about more underserved or the frontline population inside of employers, is outside of the COVID era when people couldn't really be spend money, the average American has roughly, $300 to $400 in their bank account. Taking the money out of their savings to spend on education is really challenging. A lot of folks are burdened with student loans inside this country. They started something, it was the wrong time in their life or the wrong program. And so they had to abandon it and instead trade off education with working. And so they are saddled with student loan debt. And you see the news kind of cover this on an almost daily basis on what's happening with student loans inside this country. And so you have these individuals who really want to invest in themselves, but they do not have the money and they do not have the time to be able to invest in educating themselves. And so one of the things that over time we've learned is that if you can remove that financial barrier, people aren't going to like take the money and pocket it. They're going to be excited that their employer is investing in them more. They're going to be more loyal to their employer. We see a 2.6 times increase in retention relative to those who don't go through a guild program because their employer just invested in them, and not in like a short form or micro learning, but invested in their education. And so they're super excited about it and they feel like their employer cares about them, which they do. Their employers do care about them. And so there are those types of decisions where you look at the barrier to entry, and coming from a product background, thinking about what is driving barrier to adoption or barrier to persist and continue. It's really fun to think about that in the context of education versus to use a consumer app or something else, because these are life-changing things that can happen to these employees if you can get them enrolled in the right program. In the early days, we had no program recommendation engine, and so the catalog was filled with hundreds of options. And as you know, there is the thing called choice paralysis. And so if you do not actually get more information about the user and understand where they're starting from, and then personalize the experience or the recommendations to them, both as an individual, but also inside the context of their employer, they end up either choosing nothing because there's too many options, or they end up choosing the wrong thing because they are not set up for success to start with. And so there are a lot of really cool principles in thinking about personalization and driving adoption and retention from a product experience that I think have been really exciting to unlock for the purpose of driving economic mobility.
Yeah, so you started from a product perspective. You were chief experience officer, but of course, 34-year-old Rachel was hit with a tragedy that really catapulted you into the seat that you're now in as chief executive officer. And we want to talk about that chapter. But before that, bring us back to that moment. I mean, you had just delivered your baby. I recall you saying Amit was just telling you, one foot in front of the other, honey. But you were also, struggling with some PPD symptoms, which we've spoken about actually on the show because few women speak about it, but it's more prevalent than we think. Walk us through that moment of decision making. How did you proceed in that time of tragedy?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a lot of things that, I think aren't talked about very much. So I had my second child and I was out on parental leave. I was going to physical therapy 3 times a week because my delivery was extremely challenging. And I had a lot of symptoms, just physical symptoms, as well as hormonal symptoms that then lead to mental barriers around just having had delivered a baby, not sure how I'm going to manage. I was having trouble sitting upright. Walking was pretty challenging because my delivery was so challenged. My abdomen had kind of separated a little bit. And so just a lot of struggle. I was having trouble breastfeeding. Actually, my baby couldn't latch. And there's like a lot of things around making sure your baby gets breast milk. It's better than formula. So just a lot going on and feeling, frankly, already overwhelmed with the 3 times PT, trying to get my baby to both eat and sleep, having another child in the household who is in some ways feeling like, what is happening? It was just me before, and now there's someone else. And so overwhelmed is probably the best way I would describe how I was feeling. And then I get this phone call. And as you mentioned, my husband, Amit, I feel so lucky that someone knows me so well and is asking me, in that moment, like, don't think about all the things that are going to happen next. Just think about the next day and the decisions that you have to make. And, asking me very much like, just put one foot in front of the other, and whatever decision you make, I'll support you. And so went from a Friday being on parental leave to a Saturday and Sunday wrapping my head around needing to step back into the business, and then showing up on Monday morning.
The phone call, like who was calling you? What was the statement there that stopped you in your tracks?
Someone from Rachel's family called me, and then I missed the phone call. So they called my husband, actually. And so I called Rachel's family member back, and they said, Rachel's gone to the hospital. I don't have more details for you right now, but I will call you later and give you an update. And then I got an update later in the afternoon that she was probably going to be in the hospital for a while. And so I needed to put a plan needed to move the plan in place for a business continuity plan.
So she was 34 years old, and I understand she was laying on the floor for a while before she was found. What happened there, and how did that affect Rachel?
My understanding is that she had had the stroke the night before on her patio, actually. And so her aunt lives down the street from her, does a walk every morning around her neighborhood, and actually had found her lying on her patio. She has a medical background, her aunt does, and realized that Rachel had had a stroke, and so had called 911. And they had taken her to the hospital. At this time, I didn't know she had had a stroke. I just knew that she was in the hospital and something had happened.
And so the instruction, the marching order to you was, Bijal, get your act together. You have to be in the office on Monday.
No, actually, that's not what happened, because Rachel was obviously in the hospital and the family member just said this has happened. But Guild has a business continuity plan. And in that continuity plan, there's who takes over if there's something happens or someone goes on sabbatical, et cetera. And so I just knew that the next steps in the process were calling the board, and that I needed to make a decision whether or not I was going to show up on Monday morning.
And how did you come to this decision?
Like I said, a lot of, I don't think I can do this. I'm in the middle of my own struggle. I really believe in Guild's business and what we're trying to do in the world. And so I also knew that it's important for the business to have some continuity, that this was the right thing to do. I just didn't know if I had the ability to do it, given everything else that was happening. And I said I was already overwhelmed. And my husband was pretty instrumental in helping me be like, put one foot in front of the other. I actually had a lot of family in town that weekend because I had planned a 40th surprise 40th birthday party for my husband, my family, as well as Amit's family. And they were like, we have this, you got this. My executive assistant called me and was like, I can step in. I'm here to help you. The executive team was like, we got your back. The chief financial officer in particular at Guild, Chris Garber, was like, you can do this. I'll do this with you. We got this. Just a lot of people rallying behind me. A community of support is what got me through making a decision to say I can do this. And then the board was wildly supportive.
So how did this chapter then pan out? Time has passed since that happened. We have seen Rachel take stage a little bit, coming back into her own. How has this changed the way you run the business? What are your thoughts here in your chapter as CEO? Does this feel like still an interim position for you?
Actually, probably a month and a half after I took over as interim CEO, or as announced that I was going to take the interim CEO role, a board member called me one night and was like, I know this says interim, but the best thing you could do for the business is to act like the CEO. And I think that's the best piece of advice I was given, because until then I was pretty hesitant to move things around or make different decisions than kind of the decisions that had been playing out, because you don't want to rock the boat. I wanted to make sure I wasn't overstepping some line or boundary. And really that phone call was like, there are no boundaries. Like, you are the CEO now. Do what you think is most important for the business. people wouldn't put you in the interim role if they didn't think you could make the right decisions, and don't wait on decision making. We don't have time as an organization, and every day matters. And it does. In a 10-year-old company where Guild is today, we're still figuring things out and growing and scaling. Like, every day does matter, and the decisions we make matter. And our customers need to know that there's stability in this business, and their platform isn't going to shut off, or their employees aren't going to get access to things they need, or that payments are still going to be made, etc. And so, this best piece of advice I got. I feel like I got my legs underneath me relatively quickly, actually. More than not knowing what to do, is more, is it okay to make decisions and make change? And so once it was clear that that was acceptable and I didn't need to ask for permission.
And how did you arrive at that? Was it, that conversation with a board member, or was it, also time with Rachel? I know you went to see her in the hospital, but you were not allowed to speak about business, actually.
Yes, we were not allowed to speak about business, and I did go see her in the hospital. I mean, this is someone that I had, talked to / argued with / been in the trenches with for 5 years, approaching 6 years. And to then suddenly not be able to have a conversation with that person is just pretty jarring, to go one day from being able to do something and the next day not being able to do something. I went to see her. We were not allowed to talk about business, but she did say one thing that I think was also really great, which is like, you know what to do. That was super helpful in making sure she also didn't feel like I was taking this moment in time and trying to take something away from her or commandeer the business. And at that point, it was still not clear to me whether she was going to come back or not. I knew she had a long road and a long recovery, but it still wasn't clear to me what decision she was going to make or where she was going to be. And so to hear her say that, in addition to the board member, was super valuable.
I know she's recovered a fair bit, and really happy to hear that. But it sounds like you're still, commandeering the ship as she continues to heal completely. Where are we, and what does this chapter of Bijal as Boss Bij looks like in the CEO role?
So Rachel is very focused on her recovery. She plays a role on the board and continues to provide perspective. We are very much, as a business, we have a lot of cool things going on. We released 3 new products last year. We have a bunch of new stuff coming this year, and we are really focused on doubling down on how do we deliver the best possible outcomes to our employers and their employees. And so it's a fun and exciting, and I would say truly innovative time at Guild. We have some new innovative partnerships that we'll be launching, as well as new models for things that we're trying and doing to really help enable workforce development inside this country. The future's bright for Guild.
If there's sort of 3 key things that you want your legacy to be during your chapter in the CEO seat, what would they be framed around?
Yeah, I would say 2 things. One, I spent the last year and a half alongside the rest of the leadership team at Guild, really making sure that we were sustainable and had a great foundation as a business. And the market dynamics have changed greatly. It used to be, I would say, in 2020 and 2021, growth at all costs. Now there is an expectation from investors that you are growing, but that you're also profitable and sustainable as a business. And so I spent a lot of time getting that foundation solid in terms of how we're spending and what the business profile looks like, and making sure that if we spend $1, we're getting $1 back, that we're being efficient with our capital and with our spend. That is one thing. I think was a major thing that the business change and operating motion that the business need to go through, and a restructuring that I think was important to making sure the business was on solid foundation. The second is we have this huge problem ahead of us as a society and a country in particular around how do we fill the skills gap in this country, and how do we get people the skills that they need in order to be productive members of society. And so when we think about the challenges Guild is solving, it's not just challenges that are important to employers. These are challenges that are important to creating a thriving democracy inside of our country. And so how do we do our part to play a role in driving workforce development and workforce training and workforce transformation that is required? And so I hope that in this next era of Guild, you are seeing us more as a workforce development partner, trying to take your internal talent and ensure that they are best equipped to drive the workforce needs you have of the future.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. So we usually do this in person, but it was tough to find you you out in Denver this time around. So I'm playing it for you. We're going to choose some cards here, and I'm going to ask you the question that it presents. So this is a quick fire round. What kind of leaders do you hire?
Servant leaders.
Servant leaders, what does that mean?
Leaders who are helping to enable and propel their teams, as well as leaders. I hire Gumby leaders, people who can play at a strategic altitude, as well as dig into the details when needed, so that we can stay nimble and agile in what we do.
What is this word Gumby? I feel like I've heard it before.
Gumby is this character, this clay animation character who has the ability to stretch in like very cool and different directions. And in every interview, I ask, especially in leadership interviews, questions around, can you explain to me how you're a Gumby leader? How do you stretch yourself
Love
and
it.
find when to do it and when not to do it?
Ooh, well, how are you stretching yourself, Bijal, these days?
I'm spending a lot of time utilizing AI technology and trying to stay at the forefront of what's happening and what the bounds and limitations are of different technologies.
A counterintuitive lesson you've learned as an investor or an entrepreneur?
Someone said this to me yesterday, and I think it's just sticking out in my brain. An important thing, which is authenticity and transparency are not the same thing. And I think I conflate those two things a lot. I tend to be a really transparent person, but those are not the same thing.
What you wish someone told you before you made your first major financial decision?
Look into the tax implications of the decisions that you're making.
Love it. That's important. What word do you hate hearing?
No, maybe. I don't like hearing.
And because we've heard so much about, your challenging birth and all of that, so this baby's got to be worth it. What is your message, for your children? 3 key things you want them, values you want them to espouse as they grow older?
This is so easy because we actually say these values every day. Be kind, be curious, and be persistent. And then we try and reinforce those or provide examples of where they're doing those things, because I think hopefully they'll turn out as decent human beings if they focus on ensuring they uphold those 3 things.
Love it. Love it. Well, Bijal, for being kind, curious, and persistent, America and the world is benefiting from your talent. Thank you for spending the time with us here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Awesome. And finally, where can we find more information about you, about Guild?
Yeah, guild.com. You can learn all you need to know about what we're doing and how we're trying to help society.
And thanks so much for tuning in this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials on Sarah Chen Global to get the latest on the show. It would really help me out too if you enjoyed this to rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts and share your favorite episodes with a friend. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, and you've been listening to $1 Billion Moves.